Hello everybody, welcome back to our modelled writing videos. So today we are going to look at two task 1 questions for the IELTS part of the writing exam. So if this is something that you're looking at, maybe you've booked your IELTS exam and perhaps you just want more tips on how to answer the task 1, maybe you're struggling on how to structure the task 1, what to do with an overview. Well, hopefully all of your questions will be answered today. Along the way, we'll start by looking at the data, then we'll construct a plan, and then we'll do the write-up as if we were in the exam itself. So a really useful tool for your practice. Hopefully this provides a lot of information and tips for you on how to get those top band scores, which is what we are looking for. So without further ado, let's have a look at the first task, and this is going to focus on pie charts. Okay then, the information, the question itself. The charts give information about employment in the UK in 1998 and 2012. Summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Same task every time, reporting the main features, and we're making comparisons where relevant. So let's bring in the pie charts and see what we are going to be tackling. Right, here they are. So, employment in the UK, 2 different years. We've got 1988 on the left, and we've got 2012 on the right. Okay, and the key is up here. So we've got men in full-time employment and men in part-time in the blue and the grey. Okay. Initial thoughts, wow, the blue is very significant. So the men in full-time work is a large portion. And then women in full-time and then women in part-time. Okay, so down here we've actually got the total number. That's quite useful for the 4 different segments of the pie charts. So we can be specific with that. Right, that's quite nice actually. And the same here in the thousands. Okay. So let's think about our groups then. We could go by men and women, by the sexes. Or we could go full-time or part-time. There's not much in it, to be honest. Let's go full-time and part-time. Okay, the overview. So, well, there was a higher total in employment in general in 2012. More individuals were in employment in 2012. In both years, men in full-time work were the largest portion. Something along those lines. Okay, so we've got our full-time, part-time groups. Then we've got our overview. Now that is our sweeping statement. So we're not being specific here, we're just making a generalization. We leave all the data to the main 2 groups, and we want to keep this very, very general. Okay, so I'll show you now how we can write this all up here. We've got the question, and we've got some useful words to help us. So we've got synonyms for words like decrease, stay the same, increase, and when they are Combined with adverbs, it makes for a really nice way to show what's happening. And of course, we've got our data down here. Okay, so then we want to paraphrase to start off our report. This sentence here, the statement. The pie charts, oh, sorry, the charts, they are pie charts. We can write that in our paraphrased sentence. The charts give information about employment in the UK in 1998 and 2012. Okay, it's fairly short. So, like I just said, we can be more specific. The pie charts provide maybe analysis regarding employability figures in the United Kingdom. So we're paraphrasing where we can, putting it into our own words. In the years 1998 and 2012. The pie charts provide analysis regarding the employability figures in the United Kingdom in the years 1998 and 2012. Okay, I think that's good. Now we can go into our overview. So a nice start, like on the whole or in general, at first glance, something like this. On the whole, more individuals were in employment in 2012 in general. Even so, men made up the highest percentage in work, in full-time work, I should say, in full-time work for both years. Let's read it back. On the whole, more individuals were in employment in 2012 in general. Maybe we could say overall compared to 1988. Oh, that's a point. I put 1998 here. Oh, so really important to look back and double check. On the whole, more individuals were in employment in 2012. We could say were in some form of employment in 2012. Overall compared to 1988. Even so, men made up the highest percentage in full-time work for both years. Okay, I think that's good. We've just gone back and tweaked that a little bit. Brilliant. So now we can have a look at our pie charts. So let's start with, and this is when we want the data. This is what we want to do. Let's start with employment. Full-time employment we were going to look at for men and women. So, okay. Full-time work. We don't want to repeat ourselves too much, so we're trying to find synonyms. Yeah, that's okay. Full-time work. Had large proportions for both sexes in both years. Okay. In particular, men, oh, and we're checking our spelling. That's a really big part of the marks. Men consisted of over half of total employees men, we could say working a full week, a packed out week, consisted of over half of total employees in 1988. 53%. And this figure was, we can have a look down here, 12,539. This totaled, this accounted for 12,539 staff members. Okay, brilliant. So it's nice that we have that extra piece of data there. Otherwise, it's not much to, we've just got these few percentages. So it's nice to include this here. Okay, let's carry on with men. Why not? In 2012, they took 6% less males took in the same category. So there was actually more people. They just accounted for less because there's more people overall. I see. Even so, if we used even so, although there were in fact more people at 13,794. So even though their share was lower, there were still more people in work. Okay, let's talk about women. Full-time women, that's like the dark orange here. So, in contrast, full-time working females in 1988 we don't need to report on all the figures. So we could say maybe consisted of, we use consisted, yeah. Made up roughly, or were about, they're about a third, aren't they? About 1/3 of the men's figure. And then we have 4,482 employees. In 2012, their share increased to 26%. And were over half of the male number, 7,696. Okay, let's read this back and see how we're doing. On the whole, Oh, sorry, I'm reading the overview. Let's start from the group. Full-time work had large proportions for both sexes in the 2 years. The 2 years. In particular, men working a packed out week consisted of over half of total employees in 1988, 53%. This accounted for 12,539 staff members. In 2012, males took 6% less in the same category, although there were in fact more people at 13,794. In contrast, full-time working females in 1988 were about 1/3 of the men's figure, 4,482 employees. In 2012, their share increased to 26% and were over half of the male number, 7,696. Okay, I just want to add as a higher number of people were in work 29,600. Okay, I think that's a nice addition. So we're just explaining the difference there. Okay, let's go to part-time. Right, so part-time, we have the grey and we have the yellow. Okay. So they are both quite close to about a quarter. So part-time workers for both genders combined for each year researched part-time workers for both genders part-time workers for both genders for each year researched came in at around a quarter of the total. Let's start with women this time. Women took a significant portion of this, 22% in 1988. And 20%, let's do 14 years later. 14 years later. However, their figures didn't increase by that much, really. Oh, well, they decreased, but the figures increased. The percentage decreased, but the figure in the latter year rose to 5,979 individuals. Let's just do a line about men. Men in part-time work for the entire study represented the smallest proportion, notably 6% in 1988, this one went from they increased both in actual staff members and in percentage. And the number, the percentage and number rose in 2012 to 2,131. Okay, let's read this back and see how it's sounding. Part-time workers for both genders for each year researched came in at around a quarter of the total. Women had a significant portion of this, 22% in 1988 and 20% 14 years later. The percentage decreased, but the figure in the latter by 2%. But the figure in the latter year rose to 5,979 individuals. Men in part-time work for the entire study represented the smallest proportion, notably 6% in 1988. Remaining however, the percentage and number rose in 2012 to 7% and 2,131 respectively. Percentage and number. Okay, I think that's good. We've just read it back, edited, made sure it sounds okay. So let's count the words for this one. Okay, so this is a bit of a longer answer, and that has come to 232 words. So as you can see, that is on the large side, but we've still approached it in the same way. So you can adapt your answers. Maybe you could, if you wanted to decrease, you could take a point out of each paragraph, for example, or a sentence. And that's a way that you could slim this down if you wanted to. But there we go. There we have our two pie charts, which may seem a bit daunting at first, but hopefully that's shown you that, oh, that's okay. We can still group and compare and contrast and select the main information, which is the task. Okay then, well, let's have a look at the next task, and we are going to have a table and chart. So a multi-chart question here. The bar chart and table show information about students from abroad studying in 4 English-speaking countries in 2004 and 2012. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So we have the same question here, the same task to do, which is always to report the main features and make comparisons where they are relevant. Okay, let's see the data. Right, okay, so we have the 4 countries on the x-axis of the bar chart. USA, UK, Australia, Canada. We've got the 2 years, 2004 and 2012. And on the x-axis here, we've got the number of students in the thousands. Okay. So then down in the chart, we've got the foreign students as percentage of total student number. Okay, so we have their actual numbers here, and then we've got their percentages of the total. Interesting. Okay. Right, so I think, well, we've got a variety of ways we can report back on this. It might be tempting to do one group on the bar charts and one group on the table. Although with questions where for example, one of the variables are the same, so the countries are the same, we could pair the countries up together and then use both sets of information in that grouping. Let's have a think about this one. So, for example, the USA we could do this in two ways. The most students, so for example, we could go for the USA and maybe either the UK or Australia, or maybe the UK and Australia have very similar numbers of students, foreign students, or we could go by percentages. Australia has a high percentage, followed by the UK, in fact. Maybe we'll do the UK and Australia because they have very similar figures and trends there. And then the USA and Canada have the lower percentages, even though they have vastly different numbers. Okay, so overall, this is our overview. We just want a general statement. The USA, in both years, had the highest number of foreign students, although Australia's students from other countries held the highest percentage, something along those lines. So the USA had the most numbers, but the percentage wise, that belonged to Australia. Okay, so we've got our two groups. Now we can go into our write-up. And we have the question, useful words, and the data itself. So let's start off, as always, by paraphrasing this sentence here. The bar chart and table show information about students from abroad studying in 4 English-speaking countries in 2004 and 2012. Okay, so how about we say it's difficult to paraphrase the bar chart, so we can start with that. The bar charts and table provide data about on students from abroad, individuals from different countries. Studying is hard, it's a bit tricky to paraphrase. Maybe learning in 4 nations where English is the primary language in the years 2004 and 2012. Okay, let's read this back. The bar chart and table provide data on individuals from different countries learning in 4 nations where English is the primary language in the years 2004 and 2012. Okay, so I think that's good. Now we can go into our overview statement. So we're not drawing upon data here, we're just doing a sweeping statement. In general, the USA in both years had the highest number of students enrolled, maybe, whereas on the other hand, Australia Australia had the highest or the largest percentage of foreign learners compared with the other countries. In general, the USA in both years had the highest number of students enrolled, whereas on the other hand, Australia had the largest percentage of foreign learners compared with other countries. Okay, then, so let's go for let's do the UK and Australia having very similar numbers in the thousands for students, and then we can go into their percentages. Okay, so the UK, the UK and Australia had almost identical figures for the number of students, of foreign students studying in their country. The UK and Australia had almost identical figures for the number of foreign students studying in their country. And it was actually under 200,000 for both years. As the number, this number stayed under 200,000. Okay, so let's talk about 2004, and okay, so we have a increment of 50,000. So this is maybe about 120,000, and they look to be the same number here. So in 2004, in fact, they both had 120,000 students within their education system. In 2012, the UK was just shy of 200,000. And I would say that Australia was about 190, while Australia had, we could do the difference, 10,000 less. Okay, let's talk about their percentages now. So Australia is quite striking. So strikingly, this, let's talk about the percentage for Australia was the highest for both years. The percentage that these students, or the percentage statistic, Australia was the highest for both years, for both 2004 and 2012. Let's do 19% and 24% respectively. Okay, let's briefly mention the UK. The UK had the next highest percentages, particularly in 2012 at 13. Okay, I think that's good. Let's read it back and see how it's sounding. The UK and Australia had almost identical figures for the number of foreign students studying in their country. This number stayed, this amount stayed under 200,000. In 2004, in fact, they both had 120,000 students within their education system. In 2012, the UK was just shy of 200,000, while Australia had 10,000 less. Strikingly, maybe we could put strikingly, however, the percentage statistic for Australia was the highest for both, was the highest in the study for both 2004 and 2012, 19% and 24% respectively. The UK had the next highest percentages, particularly in 2012 at 13%. Okay then, so I think that's good. Let's go to our next paragraph, our next grouping, and we're going to look at the USA and Canada. So let's start with the USA and Canada. Even though the USA and Canada had vastly different numbers of students, their percentages were the two lowest. Okay, this is going to be a bit shorter, this paragraph probably, that's all right. So the USA, two lowest, maybe we could say, and stayed under 10%. The USA had the highest or the largest amount of students in the study in 2012 at almost 250,000, while Canada had the lowest in this year. We can say maybe 60,000. 60,000. Okay, let's talk about their percentages. So, despite this, the United States percentage was 2% for both years. Whereas Canada's was more than double in 2004 at 5%. Okay, let's read this one back, a bit smaller, this paragraph, and see how we're doing. Even though the USA and Canada had vastly different numbers of students, their percentages were the two lowest and stayed under 10%. The USA had the largest amount of students in the study in 2012. That should be in 0. There we go. Always important to edit. At almost 250,000, while Canada had the lowest in this year, 60,000. Despite this, the United States percentage The United States percentage was 2% for both years, whereas Canada's was more than double in 2004 at 5%. Okay, I think that's good. Let's have a count of the words and see how we're doing for this one. Okay, then, so this was a bit smaller than the last one at 217 words. There we go. So you can see today how we've talked about pie charts and we've talked about multiple different charts, like in this case, the bar chart and the table. And we've tried to paraphrase as much as possible. We've tried not to repeat ourselves. We've always put the data into logical groups, and we've paraphrased and done our overview. So the structure stays the same every time. It's just the data that changes. And hopefully that's been helpful today. Do let us know if you've got any questions or comments. We love to hear from you. And we'll see you in the next video.